We certainly hope each of you enjoyed a summer of your choosing. Travel, rest, scholarship, reflection, rededication, reinvention. Whatever your goals were, here's to achieving them, and we certainly hope you did. I'm Karen Sissom Gunn, and I proudly serve as your Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs at Cal State Long Beach. It is indeed an honor to announce that the 2024-25 academic year is officially called into session. We have members from across our Beach community present this morning, from President Connolly's executive leadership team, our dedicated leaders across the campus divisions, our visionary academic administrators, our college deans, associate deans, department chairs, and our world-class faculty members, to our incredible staff members, program directors, and of course our bright students, faithful friends, and local supporters of our great institution. Whatever your connection to our campus today, on behalf of the Beach, we thank you all for joining us, both in person and via live stream. Welcome all, and you know I mean that with a capital A, capital L, capital L. Welcome all. Now, you may have noticed we have a special guest with us today. Before we get into the program, let's stop and say a special hello and wave to Professor Loretta J. Ross. Now, if you're here in person, you should have received a bookmark as a souvenir. And if you scan the QR code, it will lead to our convocation website, where you can find all of the event details, speaker information, and more. So don't forget to check it out. As we kick off our academic year, now is time to reflect on all you aim to achieve, to learn about exciting campus updates, and to connect with one another in a common affirmation toward being the best we can be for the Beach. On behalf of President Connolly and myself, thank you for supporting our shared mission to be a force for public good. Thank you for always putting our students first. Thank you for playing a vital role in the success of our institution. None of this could be possible without our entire Beach community working together to meet the moment. Whatever the moment is, we rise together to meet the moment. So let's set our sights, minds, and hearts on declaring that we are ready to make this a powerful academic year. Before diving deeper into our program, let's pause in reverence to acknowledge that Cal State Long Beach is located on the sacred site of Pavangna. We acknowledge that we are on the land of the Tongva, Gabrieleño, and the Ahashiman Waneño nations who lived and continue to live here. We recognize that the Tongva, Ahashiman nations and their spiritual connection as the first stewards and the traditional caretakers of this land. We thank them for their strength, perseverance, and resistance. Thank you. Dear friends, convocation is a revered tradition here at the Beach. It's our chance to gather in community, to share our vision and hopes for a new year. This will also be a significant year for our campus, as we will celebrate our 75th anniversary as an institution next month. Our community gives us purpose and the resolve to meet the needs. Yes, I dare say challenges, opportunities of the year. And you know what? Come spring 2025, we will have achieved so much. That's how we roll here at the beach. Now, we have some cherished guests with us today. Each year, we select extraordinary beach students as recipients of the prestigious President's Scholarship. This highly recognized program, both in the state and nationwide, prepares these bright minds for success on our campus and beyond. President Scholars, please stand if you're able to do so and be recognized. Scholars, you are what we mean when we speak of scholarly excellence. We're impressed by your brilliance in thought and in spirit. Some of you even have family here today. It is such a joy for your loved ones to share in your recognition. Much of what you've achieved is because of them, and we honor them as well. Scholars, just know you make us all so proud. Congratulations and welcome. You may be seated. Another highly celebrated group joining us today remotely are our very own, very special Long Beach College Promise students. The Promise makes possible a college education for each student in the Long Beach Unified School District. This is a transformational program and is a feature effort for the beach toward creating greater access to education for capital A, capital L, for all. We are excited for you, and remember, we're cheering for you. Welcome, Long Beach College Promise students. Thank you, Beach family, for helping me recognize some of our students with us today. You know, Convocation is a time to plug into our students as our why. Our students sit at the center of our mission. As we look toward this year, I ask us to all reflect on the kind of community we wish to create and participate in for our students, for our colleagues we hold so dear, and for ourselves. What kind of campus community do we want to be? Let's find ways to bring others in. It's up to each of us to cultivate a community, and as our strategic priorities note, where everyone's voice and well-being are valued. To that point, we invited a special guest who will deliver a keynote address in just a few minutes. We hope our speaker will offer calling in strategies toward having more meaningful and mutually appreciated conversations that help support our diverse perspectives and call one another into respectful, fruitful dialogue. These strategies will help us center our approach to our engagements this year. This current moment in time is a polarizing one, no doubt about it. That is reality. Oftentimes, we don't have the words ourselves, let alone have the words to help others articulate all the complex things they feel and experience. There are moments we all experience, wishing there was a better way to say a thing. But I know we can find some common ground in our interactions with one another because we believe in our campus values and we believe in the best intentions. We believe in our compassion. We talked about that and kicked off last year with compassion. and in extending ourselves to be our better selves to others. As such, we must commit to having conversations within and across our perspectives, making space for others to be heard and appreciated. None of us own a singular point of view on matters. After all, isn't that what intrigues us and feeds our curiosity in academia? Inclusive conversations and inclusive practices matter and are in fact vital in the academy. So before we get to our keynote, first let me welcome other voices of the Beach community to our program who will also share their vision for the new year. Please help me welcome our Academic Senate Chair, Dr. Neil Holmgren. Dr. Holmgren is a full professor in the Department of English. Shout out to English. And Neil will be a champion and advocate for our Beach faculty. Please welcome, he's here, Dr. Holmgren to the stage.
Thank you for the introduction, Provost Sissom-Gunn. I've been an English professor here for 17 years, and I'm speaking today as the chair of CSULB's Academic Senate. Welcome to the 2024-2025 academic year. In my brief time today, I'll tell you a little bit about the Senate and our plans for this year. Academic Senate is the main shared governance body on our campus, a deliberative group of students, staff, administrators, and faculty. We work cooperatively for 2 meetings each month to develop policies, procedures, and practices, and make recommendations to implement improvements on campus. Shared governance, a term that comes to us from the American Association of University Professors, refers to the involvement of faculty in, quote, personnel decisions, selection of administrators, preparation of the budget, and determination of educational policies, end quote. In a way, we are the ultimate calling in body at CSULB, since we are the only organization where all constituencies have a voice and vote. We discuss new academic programs, such as majors and minors. We revise campus policies on topics that affects students, staff, faculty, and administrators, such as grading, tenure, and yes, you wouldn't believe it, but drones. We actually have a policy for that. And we hear a report from President Connolly, who generously attends each of our meetings. This year, we are working hard to keep the campus GE policy and others up to date and helpful for the entire university community. Senate has its tense moments, its struggles, and its celebrations. Think of our meetings as healthy, city council-like gatherings that can get a little goofy and sometimes heated. The meetings are, though, I would say, consistently more fun and serene than, on the one hand, sessions of the US Congress, or, on the other, the stressful encounters of characters like joy and anxiety in the head of Riley, the adolescent protagonist from this year's summer Pixar movie, Inside Out 2. Considering the idea of calling in to seek greater understanding on campus this year, I want to mention some opportunities for empathy, inclusion, and understanding. This is a good thing to do after last academic year, which was, by many accounts, tough. There was a faculty strike, a new textbook program announced, enrollment concerns heightening across the system, and a new GE policy mandated by the trustees. As Senate Chair, I'd like to call in 4 different groups as we prepare for another year together. With compassion and empathy, I would like to call in all our leaders, whether administrators on campus or in the Chancellor's office, and ask them to be collaborative in their leadership and avoid top-down decisions. Remember that faculty are not barriers to the university's mission, but a critical part of student learning and the production of new knowledge. Secondly, I want to call in the critics of the Senate's work, whether at CSULB or in places like Arizona, where proposed legislation has targeted academic senates. I may joke about the mood of our meetings, but I believe that positive change cannot happen without careful deliberations. I understand when fellow senators are skeptical about campus decisions. It is valuable when we think through the consequences of proposals for everyone. I'm happy to take constructive suggestions, but I am also proud to defend our work. Thirdly, I also want to call in the students. As a representative of the Senate and of the faculty, I'm thrilled to work with you, students, as you learn and succeed. It cannot be overstated that helping students is the most amazing and exciting part of the job of a professor. Don't forget, though, that while faculty members are certainly tired, over-caffeinated perhaps, and aging human beings, we are also compassionate and caring. We came to CSULB to engage your mind and your spirit. You might think that faculty should treat you like a customer, but the teacher-student relationship is far more complex than a consumer model, since you don't purchase an education, but earn it in collaboration with faculty. Finally, I want to call in all my fellow faculty and staff members, to call in, well, myself. Let's do a better job this year being patient and friendly. This year's challenges will be more difficult than we anticipate, but there will also be good surprises, possibilities to meet new people and grow in ways that we have not yet imagined. For everyone in the university community, here's to a year of success and discovery. Please don't hesitate to seek out me or your senators with questions and ideas, and go Beach. Thank you. I now have the honor of welcoming our 2024 Staff Council Chair, Colleen Ryan. Colleen serves as the Senior Academic Affairs Facilities Specialist at CSULB. She is a valued member across our campus, and this year she is proud to represent and support the needs of our staff members at the Beach. Please help me welcome Colleen Ryan.
Hello, Beach family. Thank you for honoring me with an invitation to speak at Convocation today. And I must start with a little bit of a confession. I'm actually pretty nervous. And I usually don't have a problem speaking, so if you know me, you know that's true. I was curious about what it is about this event and this particular audience that makes me so flustered. And I decided it's not only the solemnity and the importance of the event, but also a little bit of my own imposter syndrome and my feelings about my perceived place in the hierarchy of this institution. And the irony is that as Staff Council Chair, it's my mission to promote staff voice and to find opportunities for staff to be a part of conversations that are so vital to our shared governance. As humans, we're all about where we're coming from. Our perspectives are as unique as our fingertips, cast from our fundamental beliefs, our assumptions, our ideals, our values, and forged in the fires of our experiences. We all have our own truth, but it's just one truth. It's just part of a greater whole truth. This time of year is so exciting on campus, and next week I welcome my 25th fall semester in service of this institution. And the promise of a fresh start and a new academic year is palpable. But staff, when you are asked, "How was your summer?" I see you. For many here, at the end of May, faculty, students, or staff are holding on by their fingertips. But this might be what it feels like for a lot of you right now. Summer is a great vibe on campus, and in many ways it is a chance to take a breather. But for so many teams, summer is a scramble to do the work we can't do in the academic year. Construction projects are speeding to complete on time, BBS and tech staff are preparing thousands of rooms for instruction, advisors are assisting thousands of students, and administrators and coordinators are speedily adding sections in order to accommodate this need. SOAR teams are conducting tours, there's orientations paving the way for incoming classes, and that's just a fraction of the flurry. It wasn't this, was it? If you flip this, it just looks like this guy's laying down. But that's not what it was. And I don't mean to be glib about perspective, I just thought the visualization is helpful. For everybody here, I want to offer you a helpful reminder that perspective is important. Relationships crumble, and the opportunity for growth crumbles in the conversations that don't happen. Every person you meet, every single one, knows something that you don't know. In the Venn diagram of all of our various jobs here at Cal State Long Beach, where we overlap, that little piece that overlaps, that is our mission. We meet in the mission of student success, and we always have that as a shared starting point in our conversation and a shared starting point of our goals. Meet at that shared mission, have conversation, and remember that honoring perspective is important. Thank you so much. Have a fabulous year. Go Beach! I now have the honor of introducing our new ASI president, Nikki Majidi. Nikki is a dynamic third-year political science student with a minor in international economics, and upon graduation, she intends to pursue law school and hopes to become a law professor. She is passionate about student advocacy and is proud to represent Beach students this year as the 2024 ASI president. Please welcome to the stage Nikki Majidi.
Let me get set up here. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Colleen, for that kind introduction. And my deepest thanks to the Provost and President Connolly for giving me the honor of addressing you all today. Standing before you as this year's ASI president, I'm incredibly proud to be a part of a campus that prioritizes community, diversity, and inclusion. My journey, like those of many of my peers, has been profoundly shaped by the support and guidance of our dedicated faculty and staff. They've helped us find our voices, challenge our limits, and achieve what we once thought was impossible. When I think back to the start of my college career, a pivotal moment stands out: qualifying for the National Forensics Association tournament. When my coach, Aaron Fullman, announced that my speech on the 2022 Iranian Revolution had earned a spot on the national stage, I felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. As an Iranian woman, that moment crystallized for me the profound power of belonging. It underscored the importance of being part of a community that not only values, but uplifts every individual's unique contribution. From my first day on campus as a freshman, I was met with acceptance and an array of opportunities. I joined clubs, teams, and organizations that made me feel heard and embraced. Yet as I immersed myself in this inclusive environment, I couldn't help but think of those I cared about who were not as fortunate. The ongoing Iranian Revolution weighs heavily on my heart, especially given my deep connections to the culture and the country. While the people in Iran are fighting for their lives and the rights that we often take for granted, I found myself in a place where I had the support and freedom to write a speech about their struggle. The stark contrast between the two worlds that I inhabit made me deeply grateful for Long Beach, a place that has provided an inclusive space for me during both the good and challenging times in my life. This experience reaffirmed my belief that at Long Beach State, inclusivity isn't just a value that we talk about. It's something that we live and breathe every day. However, I'm keenly aware that not all students have shared my positive experience on this campus. For some, our campus can feel hostile or unwelcoming. This year, I'm determined to ensure that our student government leaders, the voices and the representatives of the student body, play a prominent role in changing that narrative. By connecting with students in a meaningful way, we can forge bonds that might otherwise go unnoticed. My hope is to create a more inclusive environment by taking a more proactive approach, bridging the gap between students and their leaders. Through these connections, we can foster a space for listening, understanding, and ultimately, for educating ourselves and others about what true inclusivity means. This is the year to uplift the voices of Long Beach State University. Let us engage in meaningful dialogue, honor our commitments to the student body, and continue to grow as a community where everyone feels as they belong. Let's make this year one to remember. Go Beach.
Exceptional. Thank you, Nikki, for your inspiring words today. Our students are so lucky. Where are you? There you are. Our students are so lucky to have you as their advocate this year. And also, Colleen and Neil, dear colleagues, thank you so much. You've added so much richness to the message for the Beach community this year. So thank you all. Yes, Beach family. This year, we changed things up a little. We've asked a very special guest to deliver a keynote address, a message we hope will give us all food for thought as we think about how we endeavor to approach our new academic year, our interactions, and ultimately, how we can best create a thriving and inclusive campus community. It's my pleasure to introduce our esteemed and renowned convocation keynote speaker, Professor Loretta J. Ross. Now, you have those QR codes and you have access to Professor Ross's full biography, but she's an activist, a public intellectual, a scholar, a MacArthur Foundation Genius Award recipient in 2022, and associate professor at Smith College. I think you'll see she has a passion for innovating, creative imagining about global human rights and social justice issues. In her work, Calling In the Calling Out culture, Professor Ross transforms how people can overcome political differences to use empathy and respect, two big words, to guide difficult conversations. She has an incredible bio, so don't forget to check it out and celebrate all of her accolades via your QR code. Without further ado, I turn over the floor to Professor Loretta J. Ross. You got it.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope this microphone is working. Okay. Well, I'm going to try to set a timer. Oh, actually, I'll just look at my watch. The problem with hiring a professional talker is we don't know when to shut the F up. So I'm going to try to stay disciplined. It is such a joy to be here with you, but I have to honestly say, this last week has been filled with joy. I mean, really, I'm not supposed to be partisan, but I swear, it really feels like the human rights movement is on the upswing right now. And Those people who are opposed to human rights, and you know who I'm talking about, actually think that they're fighting us. But I think they're wrong. We're fighting them, but they're not fighting us. I think they're fighting forces way beyond their control because they're fighting the truth. They're fighting evidence. They're fighting history, like we can all forget we're in the 21st century and not the 19th. But most of all, they're fighting time, as if they could just send us back to the 19th century and somehow we won't notice. I frankly think they're pimples on the ass of time. Which I wish I had invented that phrase, but that was actually taught to me by someone in the civil rights movement. So, with truth, time, evidence, and history on our side, I believe we have the winning hand. Because no group of angry white men can overturn truth, time, evidence, and history. The thing that most pisses me off is that we're not in charge of the timeline. Because if I was in charge of the timeline, the change we desire and deserve would be happening now and not take 400, 500 years. But that's all right, because I know about the inevitability of justice, even if it doesn't happen in my lifetime. That gives me hope, that gives me joy, but most of all, it gives me tolerance, patience, for understanding that most people who are misled about the promise of freedom and joy aren't doing it out of malevolence, they're doing it out of a wounded feeling of not feeling relevant in the 21st century. So I get that. So, having said all of that, let me do my commercial. I got drawn into understanding and talking about the call-out culture, not because I understood what was going on social media. Actually, I'm a boomer. I'm in my 70s. And my grandson, about 10 years ago, decided that he wasn't going to answer any calls from grandma. It would just go to voicemail, right? Y'all know what I'm talking about. Like, an 18-year-old doesn't know how to answer the damn phone. So when I finally got hold of him, I said, you know, baby, you're my heir. Everything I've created is coming to you if you don't piss me off by not answering the phone. So you better put a ringtone on there for grandma, okay? He said, Grandma, if you want to talk to me, get on Facebook. That's where I am. Y'all know what happened with that, right? I got on Facebook and he got off of it saying, that's for old folks now. I said, I don't care if you go to Tic-Tac or Toc-Tic, you better stay in touch with grandma. But once I got on Facebook and stayed on it, I noticed something that was like totally flying beneath my radar because I'm not on social media. I noticed how unbelievably mean people were being to each other. And I've been doing social justice activism by that time over 50 years, and I'm like, excuse me? Why are these people saying online things they don't even have the courage to say to people's faces? So I asked the young person about it, and she said, oh, you mean the call-out culture? I said, y'all named it? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, what are y'all doing about it? And she shrugged and walked away as if it was inevitable as gravity. And that answer didn't rest well with me. As I said, I've been doing community activism and organizing for a long, long time. I've had to teach black feminist theory to men who raped women like me. I've had to deprogram white supremacists in the Ku Klux Klan, many of whom probably would have killed me at some point before they had their change of heart. And Lord knows, as a black feminist, I've been trying to teach the women's movement about inclusion for a long, long time. So I figured if I could figure out how to talk to rapists, Klansmen, and unwoke feminists, why the hell you can't talk to somebody who just used the wrong damn gender pronoun? And I say that because it's about not being able to make proper threat assessments. So anyway, I got to thinking about what was going on, and I decided to write a book called Calling In the Call-Out Culture, but of course Simon & Schuster renamed it, How to Start Making Change with Those You'd Rather Cancel. Well, I get pissed off so much it wasn't hard for me to accept that subtitle. I mean, my eyes get broke every day by what people got on, much less what their politics are. So, unfortunately, the book will come out in February 4th, 2025 as a Black History Month release, but we've put somewhere in the audience the card, the palm cards. I hope they got passed out to you. If not, who has the palm cards, by the way? Oh, y'all got them, okay. And there's a QR code on it, and you can pre-order it. And then, so I'm getting ready now to talk my books to you. And I have given this PowerPoint to the people here at what I hear y'all call the beach. That's a hell of a slogan, go beach. As opposed to go to the beach, go beach. But I'm giving it to the people here at the beach to share with you. I do advise you now, don't try to pirate the shit, because I've got a real good IP lawyer. Okay? But you have my permission to use it. And by the way, I teach this stuff online in classes. You can visit my website and register for it if you can afford it, because each class is $5. The whole class is $20. So if you can wean yourself away from spending $20 a different way, you can sign up for my next class in the fall online, and we can give you more details on it. So let's get into the PowerPoint. I'm supposed to be able to work this PowerPoint. Let's see if it works. Okay, there's my commercial. The book, the Calling In book I just talked about, but most of the people who know me as the co-creator of the theory of reproductive justice, and so that was the topic of my 3 previous books that you see up there. How many of you heard of the framework reproductive justice? Not many of you, right? Well, let's talk about it, because I can't leave y'all without knowing about reproductive justice, because we're at the 30th anniversary of the creation of that frame. Reproductive justice moves beyond the polarizing debates of the pro-choice and pro-life movements. Basically, it is a human rights approach to dealing with reproductive politics that says that everyone has the human right to decide if they'll have a baby, whether that's the right to use abortion or birth control or abstinence. If they don't want to have a baby, of course you can use those, but every human being also has the right to decide to have a baby. And that is using, midwives or doulas, or having your birth plan respected and avoiding like an unnecessary cesarean section. And then the third tenet of reproductive justice is once you have that baby, you have a right to raise that baby in a safe and healthy environment. And we as Black women had to create reproductive justice because we felt that both the pro-choice and the pro-life movement were neglecting the discussion on what happens once the baby's here. They were so focused on whether or not the baby should be born. We're like, wait a moment, what about those of us who believe that our children should be able to go to schools without fear of gun violence? They should have drinkable water. They should have, safe neighborhoods to live in, not neighborhoods built on toxic dumps, on and on and on. So because this theory came from the margins of society to the center of society, for those of us who pay attention to reproductive politics, it has become the dominant way to talk about reproductive politics. Again, you know it now. The right to have a child, the right not to have a child, and the right to raise your children in safe and healthy environments. Now, 10 years after we created it in 1994, the LGBTQ movement thought that we hadn't gone far enough, so they added a fourth tenet, which we embraced, and that's the right to gender identity, and my favorite, the right to sexual pleasure. I'm like, yeah, I can get with that. Right? And the right to, participate in a discussion around reproductive politics. So those are the four tenets now. Now you can say you've gotten your brief reproductive justice education. And don't say in the future you've never heard of the term, because you have. But that ain't the topic I'm here to talk about tonight. So today, where the time is it? I don't even know what time it is. When we East Coast people come to the West Coast, we get horribly confused. But let's move on. Freedom has been a theme this past week, hasn't it? Freedom and joy. And so I thought I'd bring in here A. Philip Randolph. For those of you who don't know, he was a labor organizer with the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, which of course was people who serviced the trains, the passengers on the trains, back in the beginning of the 19th century. But freedom isn't something that you can claim without fighting for it, as we have learned. So I thought I'd bring into this conversation A. Philip Randolph. But let's move on into why we want to build a calling in culture. It isn't just about being nice to people. When you think calling in is about being nice, you don't understand the difference between niceness and kindness. Nice is ignoring something that makes you uncomfortable. Kindness is looking directly at that thing that makes you uncomfortable and choosing to deal with it. Let me try to give it as an example. Generally, when we parent and we see somebody who's different, let's say somebody's in a wheelchair or something, niceness is telling, oh, don't say anything about that, look away, because you don't want to make them feel stared at. Kindness is encouraging your child to talk to the person, to humanize them, to get their curiosity addressed. Now, obviously, it's up to that person in that wheelchair whether or not they want to talk. But the point is, you're teaching your child to notice and appreciate difference instead of being afraid to even talk about it. This is what we have to do. So far, we've only taught our children niceness in terms of difference instead of respect and inclusion in terms of difference. And so that's why we need a calling in culture. We have to seek accountability, but how you seek that accountability really, really matters. As I tell everybody from K through 12, college and on, you can say what you mean and you can mean what you say. But it's a choice whether you say it mean. Don't pretend it's not. We can seek accountability through love and respect better than we can seek it through anger and disrespect. Guess what? If people have made a mistake and they think that they're going to be reamed out for making that mistake, they're going to run as fast as they can from accountability. Because nobody runs to the firing squad, you know what I mean? Unless they got some other issues. Really, I mean, I don't want to be around people that run towards firing squads. Ooh, what does that say about me? Anyway, I guess that means I don't have a whole lot of sympathy for people who are self-destructive. But anyway, but if they say, okay, people can handle the fact that I'm not perfect, I can handle the fact that I'm not perfect, and I can deal with being held accountable for my imperfections, that's how you draw people in the conversation. So let's go through the PowerPoint. Oh, by the way, as you notice, I do the world's worst PowerPoints. All the people who are professionally doing PowerPoint say, only put 4 lines on a page. And I'm like, honey, I write dissertations in my PowerPoint. I don't know. But I do believe people learn by listening and reading at the same time, which is why I do a PowerPoint in the first place. Some things stick with you because you read it. Some things stick with you because you heard it. Some things stick with you because you watched it. Now, I'm not a watched it person. I mean, I'm probably the only person in the audience that read the Game of Thrones instead of watched the Game of Thrones. I've never seen the movies. I tried to, but all that gratuitous rape against women was just too much for me because it wasn't in the book. But moving right along. I wish I could learn to stick to the topic. Let me go on. If we want to build a human rights-based society where inclusion is the norm instead of rejection, we're going to have to learn about calling in. And let's be clear, we use the concept of diversity in incomplete ways because we think of it as representational. Do we have a black person? Do we have a queer person? Do we have this? We don't think about it as diversity of ideologies. For example, why, if we are trying to create a human rights movement that has black people, white people, Latinas, Asian Americans, Native Americans, everybody in it, who by definition are going to have different lived experiences because they come from different places and went through different stuff. If that's what we mean, how the hell do we expect them to all agree on one thing when they get to the human rights movement? It's not even logical. When we say, okay, bring all these people from all these diversities, and somehow we have to mold them into groupthink. I often say, we're looking to build a human rights movement. When many different people think many different thoughts and they move in the same direction, that's a movement. But when many different people think the same thought and they move in the same direction, that's a cult. And stop your cult building activities calling yourself organizing, because you ain't organizing shit. To be honest. I didn't promise not to curse, so I hope nobody. Okay. So if we're going to create this human rights movement, we've got to invite self-reflection, self-correction, and on. You read that already. I believe in what my ancestors and every prophet I've ever supported have said, that we need to build a domestic U.S. human rights movement. As a matter of fact, Dr. Martin Luther King, March 31st, 1968, noted that there was a triple revolution taking place. There was a revolution in communications with our ability to speak to people around the world. There was a revolution in weaponry, and he was talking about the atomic bomb and its ability to destroy the world. But he said the most important revolution is this freedom explosion that's taking place globally called human rights. Then he was assassinated 4 days later. When I first heard this story, I was pissed off because everybody told me Dr. King had a dream. Ain't nobody ever told me he had a plan. The plan for his work to be dedicated to building a US-based human rights movement that could criticize not only human rights violations abroad, but domestic human rights violations as well. So once I learned about this, I started building the human rights movement, and my boss at the time was Reverend C.T. Vivian, who'd been an aide to Dr. Martin Luther King. I don't know if y'all know about C.T. Look him up if you don't. And so I see calling in as fundamental to building that human rights movement. Obviously, as a feminist, I'm part of the women's rights wing of the human rights movement. But I'm also disabled, so I'm part of the disability rights wing of the human rights movement. I care about racial justice, so I'm part of the civil rights wing of the human rights movement. I care about LGBT rights, so I'm part of the anti-bigotry wing of the human rights movement. In other words, wherever you see yourself on this map, how you do the work is as important as the work that you do. Because that means I can't fight for women's rights in a racist way without creating contradictions within my own movement. I can't fight for trans rights in a misogynist way without creating contradictions in my own movement. So wherever you place yourself on this, or if you need more arrows to figure out which one you want to represent, understand that how you do the work is going to be as important as the work that you do. I believe that calling in will be as important to the human rights movement in the 21st century as nonviolence was to the civil rights movement in the 20th. A statement of our values, a statement of our compassion, a statement of the world we want to build versus the world we've got. So having said all of that, let's talk about the 8 categories. You know, I'm moving the damn wrong thing. See, I'm trying to control 2 things at the same time. I can't even keep 2 thoughts in my head at the same time. So this is what I just explained, but let's go on. Oh. Next time I forget to do that, will somebody shout out and say, it's not moving? But anyway, let's talk about the 8 categories of human rights. Because I've talked about human rights, but most of us only think of human rights as being that tortured prisoner somewhere overseas. There's 8 categories of human rights. There's civil rights, which is our right to be treated as an equal to anybody in society and not be discriminated against. There's political human rights, which of course is the right to have freedom of speech, the right to vote, though in Gore v. Bush we learned, unfortunately, that we do not have the right to have our votes counted, according to the Supreme Court, which is why voting suppression is still taking place around the country. There's economic human rights, our right to have the economy managed in such a way that it meets the needs of its people instead of just the needs of Wall Street. Social human rights are those human rights that are born out of your human needs. Think about it. If you don't have food, shelter, health care, education, social support when you can't take care of those needs for yourself, you won't be around to complain about human rights very much. And I think the greatest disservice that the politicians of the United States have done is to deny the American public a chance to learn about their human rights. There should be human rights education at every level of our K through 12 and college. But it's not even an accident that we don't know these 8 categories that I'm talking about. When the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that book that's on the stage, was affirmed by the United States December 10th, 1948, which is why December 10th is Human Rights Day. A few years after that, John Foster Dulles, who was Secretary of State, for whom Dulles Airport is named after in Washington, John Foster Dulles wrote an advisory memo to the president at that time, and he said, we need to be careful about this human rights thing because we don't want our Negroes to get agitated. Can y'all read in between the lines of that? Basically, the Secretary of State was saying, we will not incorporate the Universal Declaration of Human Rights into the American system because we want to maintain Jim Crow segregation. And unfortunately, conservative opposition to human rights continues that same way today. Why do you think they're attacking critical race theory? because they're afraid that if the American public learned about its history, it would refuse to repeat it. And so that's why y'all don't already know what I'm talking about today, because there was a political resistance manifested in the 1950s to teaching the American public what their human rights are. And so here you go. Okay, and I should also add that there is a financial disincentive for colleges and universities to teach about human rights because, to be honest, if people felt that education was a human right, they might ask why they're paying $100,000 to get it. You know? Because we want to maintain the systems that violate people's human rights as long as it gives somebody an opportunity to make money. So here we are. Cultural human rights are your human right to practice your religion of your choice, your culture of your choice. Freedom of religion is, of course, a human right, but those of us in the women's movement would argue that freedom from religion is also a human right. We have the human right not to have your narrow religions imposed upon our body. And if we call the people who are trying to do that human rights violators, that would be a better, accurate description of them. Like, you know, somebody just said this week, mind your own damn business, you know? If you're not the father of my baby or related to me, why are you all up in my cootie? I want to know this. Really? I mean, how did that become your business? So moving right along. After cultural human rights, there's environmental human rights, the right to have a clean environment, the right to non-toxic neighborhoods, and non-genetically modified food if we don't want it, et cetera, et cetera. Climate change, of course, is a human rights issue. Developmental human rights are those human rights that have been demanded by what we now call the global south, but at one time it was called the developing world, and when it was called the developing world, that is when they demanded the right to exploit and explore their own natural resources and not have multinational corporations and the US military come and take their oil or take their diamonds or whatever. As a matter of fact, I think because the American people don't know about developmental human rights, we have had bad explanations of why we keep going to war in other countries. Because we've never been able to explain how our oil keeps getting under other people's sand. God just made a geological boo-boo that our armies and our corporations has to correct, right? And then sexual human rights, which are my favorite. These are the human rights demanded by the women's movement. The right to determine what we do with our bodies, the right to determine if and when we'll have sex, if and when we'll get married, the right to sexual pleasure. And when I think about the human right to sexual pleasure, I like the fact that, you know, in the boudoir, you can tell somebody, you're not doing it right. You're a human rights violator. A chance to do human rights education under every circumstance, I would argue. Now, those are not all the categories of human rights. I believe that new categories are going to emerge. I think that digital human rights matter because if you are not connected to the internet or what they used to call the information highway, soon you're going to be seen as subhuman because you're not going to be able to do any education, any banking, a whole lot of stuff you need the computer for now. And so we know that the digital divide, by definition, is a human rights violation. And that should be a top priority. And then the next category is called scientific rights. Again, all of these categories are demanded by social justice movements. I'm still trying to understand why it's only insecure billionaires that keep building big dicks to take themselves into the sky and don't even imagine how that could benefit the rest of us. I don't know if you've heard of this movement called effective altruism. Has anybody heard that term? I invite you to look it up. Basically, it's billionaires and other privileged people saying it doesn't matter if we destroy the earth because we're going to pioneer colonizing Mars and stuff. And we should use our riches to make sure that our descendants survive the apocalypse. But they have a nice branding name, effective altruism, as opposed to other ways of being kind to people are ineffective. But we'll be right along. Let me keep on. Having said all of that, let's finally get to calling in. Obviously, the calling in, the 5C continuum, is something that I created because I needed to analyze the patterns of call-outs in order to understand how to counter them. And so one of the patterns I discovered is that there's calling out, canceling, calling in, calling on, and calling it off. And I'm going to explain those in detail. Calling, let me see, how do I use this again? Calling people out is publicly shaming somebody for something that you think they've done wrong, and you want to hold them accountable. But basically, you're using anger, blaming, and shaming as your strategy of accountability, which is cute, except it don't work, right? Because again, people ain't gonna run to your firing squad. And it's creating such fear in people so that most people withhold what they're thinking honestly about a whole range of topics for fear of being called out. It's really sad in the classrooms that I teach in where students are saying, I have to worry about everything I say all the time because I don't want to be called out. That's not encouraging engagement. That's demotivating people from wanting to exchange their unfolding thoughts. So I think the generations after mine are the ones that are most immune from the call-out culture, and the ones that are coming up are the ones who are most harmed by the call-out culture. Now, obviously, there's other ways to do it, but the ultimate call-out is canceling somebody. Now, that's when you think somebody has done something so wrong and you want to get them real good. And so you don't only want to hold them accountable, but you want them to lose their jobs or lose their platforms or at least lose their reputation. But there's a problem with the whole canceling impulse. And I would argue that when you cancel somebody, you're basically replicating the tactics of the prison industrial complex. I mean, isn't that what prisons do? Silence people, exile them, and dispose of them. Nobody ever wants to hear from prisoners, whatever they've done. They only want to hear what they got sentenced for. And so how can we, as a human rights movement, replicate the tactics of the prison industrial complex without creating contradictions in our own movement? And like I said, it'd be different if it worked. But the people who are most likely to be canceled are people who can't hire expensive public relation firms to restore their reputations. It's the school teachers, the college professors, the person who's just driving a bus somewhere, or the person who worked as a landscaper who made a okay sign that somebody thought was a white supremacist sign. I mean, those are the people who are most vulnerable to being canceled. Have you seen the people lining up for a Dave Chappelle show lately, though? He ain't getting canceled. He's laughing all the way to the bank. And so we need to think about that cancellation impulse because we're canceling the most vulnerable people while not being able to actually reach the real rich and powerful people. Oh, by the way, Donald Trump rode the outrage of cancellation all the way to the White House. Did y'all notice that? There are what they call conflict entrepreneurs, people who benefit from the attention of conflict calls. And so let's move on. Calling in is not the opposite of calling out, because calling out in is also an accountability strategy. But instead of using anger, blaming, and shaming as your method of accountability, you're going to use love and respect. And I swear, it is not easy, because I want to call out people 1,000,000 times a day. But what I've learned is that my first response is usually because of my trauma. It's my second response that's because of my intelligence and my integrity. So I have to learn to swallow that first response so that I can make available to myself that second response. Because that second response, based on intelligence and integrity, is going to be the one that I can look in the eye without shame the next day. That first response might be temporarily feeling good, might make me feel good for a minute, but it's the one that I'm going to be ashamed of. By the way, this is not rocket science. If you've ever parented a child, you'll find out quickly that you cannot say the first thing that comes to your head to your children. Otherwise, they'll be in therapy and hating you for the rest of your life. We actually have the skills to swallow the first thought when you learn to be a parent and figure out what that second thought needs to be. So it's not that strange. It's just, it comes with the territory when you parent, but it also should come with the territory even if you don't parent. And so learning about calling in is a continuum, because it's not the opposite of calling out. It still is an accountability process, but instead, like I said, you're going to pursue accountability with love and respect and grace and forgiveness instead of anger, blaming, and shaming. Now, there are times when you don't want to make the investment of time and energy into calling people in or calling them out, because both of those means that you have to commit to having a conversation with them. So for that, we've created what's called calling on. Actually, I can't say we created it. Sonia Renee Taylor, who wrote The Body Is Not an Apology, created the term. She challenged me after I did a New York Times article on calling in, and she said, well, Loretta, what is it? What do we have when you want to tell people to talk to the hand? I said, oh, okay. She said, I think you should include calling on. Calling on is when you want people to do better, but you are not going to make the emotional or time investment to ensure that they do. So basically, a calling on sentence might be, I beg your pardon, if you're a boomer like me, because you can just say, I beg your pardon. When somebody says something strange to you, you look at them like they lost their mind, and you say, I beg your pardon. And then you just wait. And they start editing in their head the words that just came out of their mouths. And quite often, they'll come at you another way. Or maybe they didn't even realize the impact of what they say. But I really prefer the way young people do it than this boomer method I have, because the young people will look at you dead in the eye and say, are you okay? With 3 words. They say, you ain't okay, you need to get the fuck out my face, back off, and I don't care. They said all of that with 3 words. Are you okay? Either way, both of those are calling on strategies. Now, I think we waste too much time trying to change people as if we have the magical power to use a few words to change people, which isn't true, because if you had those magic words, you would never fight with your partners or your families or your coworkers or your schoolmates. I mean, those magic words don't exist. And particularly online, we need to learn how to call it off. That's your strategy of disengagement, because you are making the calculation of whether or not this bullshit is worth your time and attention. Since you already know you can't change people just with your words, why aren't you calculating whether or not this person is trolling you, seeking to argue with you all the time, trying to control you, using all kinds of made-up lies and statistics or whatever? You really need to ask yourself, why am I doing this? So this is the continuum. So let's talk about some examples of using these things. These are sample responses. Before you call people in, there's things you need to do. You need to do a self-assessment, take a deep breath, and decide where you are. Because if you are still bleeding from the wounds of somebody hurting you, then you don't need to call people in or call them out or call on them. You need to walk away and call it off. Because if you are not attending to your own healing, chances are if you try to call them in or out, all you're going to do is bleed all over them anyway. You may not tell them off in the first 5 minutes, but you will in the second. Because that's how trauma works. It's going to come out, whether you are aware of it or not. So you do that first self-assessment, and then you select from the 5 C's which one you're going to use. So basically, if you're trying to call, come on. If you're calling, I'll put all of these up here. We have a 3-minute time check. A 3-minute? Okay, and I got through 9 of 35 slides, so. Like I say, come to the $20 classes to get the rest. So, calling on, I just talked about, I beg your pardon, are you okay? Calling in. Instead of coming out with an angry accusation, which is our first response, why don't we turn our curiosity on about the other person? You know, I'm not sure what you meant by that. Or can you explain that to me a little further? Or reflective listening. This is what I think you heard, you said. Can we talk about what I heard you say versus what you meant? Those kinds of things. Calling out is your Karen impulse. I can't believe you said that to me. Of course, you know that's just an invitation to a fight after you have that kind of attitude, right? Calling it off. You can use that long-term or temporarily. I can't handle this conversation right now, or I will never be able to handle that conversation with you. And canceling is, of course, the Karen impulse on steroids. Let me speak to your manager, because you used the wrong word in front of me. And so since I'm at closing, come on, baby. I'm gonna stick with this one. What do they say, stick the landing? Calling in offers possibilities of building unity and inclusion. Because once you make a fundamental commitment to stop picking on people for not knowing enough, not being enough, not using the words that you think they should be using, you've really created massive possibilities for bringing people into the movement, even those you didn't think you needed or wanted. You know? And so it offers that possibility, but it also offers strategic power. Because there are so many more people who want to get along, who want to live in joy, who want to have honest conversations with people versus those who don't. There are much fewer conflict entrepreneurs out there than we think. It's just that their impact is oversized.
And I think that is about to wrap up. I'm sorry, we have a very strict time frame.
Okay.
And so I think that's going to wrap up our time because we've got to conclude our program.
Okay, and I'll just say my last sentence then. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
And it offers a philosophical vision, a chance to say what kind of world you'd like to build and how you're going to go about building it. So thank y'all for listening to me today, and you can get the rest of it.
Professor Ross, that was different. It was real, it was raw, it was unexpected, but it was different. It gave us a lot to think about. This is a different type of world we live in. Now, It is always a pleasure. You know what? You know who we're about to pull out now. It is always a pleasure, beach style, to bring up to the stage our leader, President Jane Close Connolly. Our leader who sets the tone for what life is like at the beach. President Jane Close Connolly leads this campus to reach new heights, year in and year out. We are all here for it, Madam President. Please welcome to the stage Jane Close Connolly with that beach-style applause.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That was a good job. Well, welcome all of you, faculty, staff, and students, and let me add my special welcome to the winners of the President's Scholarships. We're so happy to have you here. I know we have many special guests. You're all really special, but I was told that Ken Miller, the chair of our 49er board, is here. We really appreciate your presence. And I was also told that Dr. Mike Walter is here, our former dean of the College of Business and a great philanthropist for us and the whole community. And of course, another special welcome to Dr. Kali Conley, who, though now fully retired, continues to serve the university as my partner at what he probably describes as innumerable events. So thank you, Kali, for doing that. You know, for me, the last year really was some of the best of times and some of the worst of times, borrowing from my friend Charlie Dickens. Faculty awards, publications, grant dollars, and more were spectacular. We finished our No Barriers philanthropic campaign a year early and with $38 million over our goal of $275 million. I love those millions of dollars, yeah. Our student population continued to grow as planned, and increased persistence has allowed us to meet the governor's compact goals. Our students were successful in national and regional competitions, ranging from vocal jazz to rocketry, from trivia to satellites, from moot court to forensic, and many topics in between. For example, our Cole Conservatory Winds Symphony first ever appearance at the Sousa Band Festival at the legendary Kennedy Center. We launched and maintained our Black Student Success Initiative, Beach XP, Seal of Excellencia work, and the Long Beach College Promise 2.0. All of these programs are aimed at promoting success for all students. And by the way, speaking of success, did you know that our School of Nursing was recently ranked #1 in California? Our staff continued to innovate in important ways to improve HR processes, staff professional development, IT resources, and building new facilities and other infrastructure renovations. Special thanks goes to our Do It team for keeping us up and going during the worldwide computer glitch that happened a few months ago that brought many other organizations to their knees. Keeping us safe, cybersecurity, is a shared responsibility, so please pay attention and avoid phishing and scam emails. We catch thousands of these every day. For example, we caught an average of 107,000 daily attempts at intrusion this past June. Did you hear that number? 107,000 attempts to intrude upon our network. But some get through, even though we catch 107,000. So anything that looks too good to be true, that offers a free trip or asks you to buy online gift cards should be forwarded to our alert CSULB.edu for verification. So please pass the word. If you're at all suspicious, ask them. And on another innovative note, we introduced a mobile mental health support team that we call Campus Assessment and Stabilization Team, for sure, CAST. Yeah. And you should know that just last spring, I'm just talking about the spring semester, the team responded to 185 incidents of hearing about emergencies. And this allows us to make mental health resources as well as police, or in contrast to or in place of police, to those experiencing emergencies. And it's a really wonderful resource and rather unique for our campus compared to other campuses. Our athletic teams had some great moments with 6 conference championships, several postseason appearances, and all while playing with an average GPA of 3.2. That's pretty great. Thank you, Bickerstaff professionals. We're happy to welcome 2 new head coaches to our campus, men's basketball and one for baseball, Chris Acker for basketball, and our alum, TJ Bruce, for baseball. And we're also proud that our record of always having someone from the beach in the Summer Olympics since the 1950s has been maintained through at least 4 alums and 3 coaches. And by the way, LaTanya Sheffield and Gavin Arroyo coached USA teams to 17 medals. Pretty darn good. We hosted, after a 3-year hiatus, the 50th anniversary powwow, which, as you well know, is the largest gathering west of the Mississippi. We were also hosts to the National Council on Undergraduate Research, attracting 4,000 undergrads from across the nation to Long Beach. But the worst of times also covered most of the year, with polarizing tensions arising on our campus due to the horrific loss of lives in Gaza. I think the Hamas-Israel war unleashed some of our best selves in our actions to work for peace, and some of our worst selves about stereotyping Jews, Muslims, and Arabs in hurtful ethnic glosses that always fail to account for the diversity that exists within any group, and ignores the obvious pluralism that defines our democracy. Democracy cannot exist if we demonize differences. Convocation allows us to celebrate the past and look forward. So let me begin by looking forward to ways that our philanthropic successes will make tangible differences in our lives. Of the $313 million, that's a lot of dollars, that was raised or pledged, about $90 million are in planned gifts, and they will be available sometime in the future. That leaves about $223 million to invest in the campus lollowing donor directions. Some specific examples, and there are too many to mention, but we will be publicizing these. For example, the Loren Chalmers Endowment funding the ASI Beach Pantry, which provides food to thousands of our students every year, and also the $11 million gift from the Bomber Group to fund the preparation of teachers for young learners and urban settings. Wonderful. The gifts will provide 313 new scholarships and increase student services, such as allowing for bigger dollar amounts being made available for student emergency grants. The 49er Foundation endowment has grown 105% from a 2016 value of $56 million to a current value of $115 million. You should have been investing with them, yeah. You will be pleased to know that 58,838 donors gave to the campaign. Of this, 32,498 were new donors, and 23,158 were alumni donors. Total faculty and staff donors were 2,084, and the faculty and staff gave to the campaign, raising $9,280,823. So thank you all for that. And as a small token of and a small token and a way to celebrate the work and success of our UR&D team and all of you, please look for the cupcakes that are outside as you leave, and take a $9 million cupcake with you. Of course, hovering over all this good news is the reality of the war in the Middle East. That terrible war, a contentious national election, and the influence of partisan and international forces on the information we all get threaten our security. How do we move forward as a campus that is dedicated to pluralism, peace, evidence, and civility? We have engaged some nationally known experts in pluralism and inclusive excellence. You just heard from Loretta Ross, Professor Loretta Ross, and she was quite wonderful. Thank you, Professor Ross. In addition, Ibu Patel and Damon Williams will help us think through how we preserve and enhance our mission to offer excellent educational opportunities to all students in environments where they feel safe enough to learn amid all the negative, divisive forces I've mentioned. We can attempt, surely, to influence the course of the war, and we should, but we can most certainly control how we treat each other. I know we can learn to live with others of different faiths or belief systems and use our freedoms in ways that do not limit the freedoms of others. I hope we can reconcile with each other after being threatened by hyperbolic accusations that have occurred. For example, one is not a Hitler sympathizer for wanting a ceasefire in Gaza, and one is not a white supremacist for wanting a peaceful two-state solution for Israel and Palestine. Talk like that divides us. We should all learn to talk about contentious issues without personal attacks. This is a key skill in our pluralistic society. We have established for College of Liberal Arts students opportunities to learn best practices contributing to the public good in our nation. And I know the public good in our nation is somewhat difficult to define. We don't have a single language, a single religion, a single political viewpoint to hold us together. That's true. But so it is difficult to say this is what we stand for. But students, really, we're going to offer them help to learn about the unique beauty and burden of our form of democracy. The students will be called fellows and will be offered a stipend to take a series of courses and work to promote meaningful dialogue among our various student groups affected by the war, moving into calling in for dialogue. I know the dialogue will be difficult. In addition, we need internal faculty and staff champions who won't write us off as unsalvageable, but commit to working to make CSULB a better university, a university whose very vision statement demands that we be a force for good in higher education in California and beyond. The easy way forward is to tear us down. The more difficult way forward is to be part of a continuous renewal process that ensures we accomplish our mission to educate, make important discoveries across our many disciplines, and serve the state of California and the nation through world-class educational opportunities and evidence-informed programs. And we are worth working hard for. We've moved from a regional master's comprehensive university to a national research-intensive university without abandoning our students, but by bringing them along with hundreds of opportunities for them to experience high-impact educational practices, such as research with faculty members, paid internships, makerspaces, semester or year-long assignments, field work with faculty members, study abroad opportunities, and service learning placements, to name just a few. Plus, we've built extensive academic, personal, and professional services organized around the holistic needs of our students. Thanks to all the faculty and staff involved in these programs. It's really making a difference for our students. Did you know that in the most recent Money Magazine and SoFi assessment, we and only about 50 other national universities out of 745 received a 5-star rating, putting us in the same 5-star pool as places you may or may not have heard of, like Stanford, MIT, Caltech, Yale, and Princeton. You all made this happen by investing your expertise and your love of our students into creating a great university that is always striving to be better, always striving to read the signals coming from near and far, to keep transforming as a relevant university that guards and updates the universe of knowledge and maintains all that's good about becoming a truly educated person. Educated people who become leaders in their fields and can thrive in this fourth industrial revolution while exhibiting the key traits of compassion, creativity, innovation, and civility. It's likely that this period, despite how I began my remarks with the best and worst dichotomy, is like most other times. Lots of good and lots of evil, much accomplishment and much destruction, much to be hopeful about and much to be fearful about. The task ahead of us is to find joy and energy in knowing that we are part of this dialectic of creation and devastation. We have jobs that contribute to the development of purpose, expertise, and kindness. How great is that? It's a privilege to be part of a university. As John Masefield wrote in 1946, as England's poet laureate, there are few earthly things more beautiful than a university. It is a place where those who hate ignorance may strive to know, where those who perceive truth may strive to make others see, where seekers and learners alike, banded together in the search for knowledge, will honor thought in all its finer ways and will welcome thinkers in distress or in exile, will uphold ever the dignity of thought and learning and exact standards in these things. I'm glad to be with all of you at this beautiful university. Thank you, and go Beach.
Thank you, President Connolly, for giving us that wonderful walk through the accomplishments we enjoy here at the beach. This concludes our 2024 convocation. Everyone go be great, have a good rest of your day, and as always, our two favorite words, go Beach!